Harry and Meghan Markle's surrogacy scandal has entered the mainstream media domain.
Did you think it was a parody? Because I thought that this was AI. I thought this cannot be real.
The reason I didn't think it was AI is because it looks like the stomach is fake, where the baby, I swear that's the first thing I thought.
Every fairy tale is supposed to begin with once upon a time. But when it comes to Meghan Markle, the story seems to change depending on which interview you're watching. The details shift. The tone shifts and suddenly, nothing feels consistent. This is the same woman who openly tears into her own father on screen, showing little restraint or mercy in the process. And according to the carefully crafted public narrative, the so-called Duchess of Drama has somehow turned one of life's most universal and natural moments pregnancy into something that sounds less like reality and more like a multi-episode Netflix series.
And this is from a woman who attacks her father mercilessly in the series.
In one version, it's all radiant motherhood, picture-perfect moments and wellness vibes. In the next, it suddenly becomes a harrowing experience so extreme that no one else could possibly relate. Even her most loyal supporters quietly admit the narrative keeps shifting, changing faster than the British weather itself. So now the real question is this: which version are we supposed to believe? Watch closely because the contradictions don't stop here, and by the end of this video, you'll have to decide for yourself.
Meghan at the Albert Hall. How many weeks pregnant was she supposed to be? Was it about 8 weeks? And she looks as if she's at least 5 months pregnant.
People familiar with royal media circles often joke that following Meghan's pregnancy timeline feels like studying a story packed with endless plot twists. One moment, she's describing a calm, sun-soaked nesting phase. The next, she's recounting emotional trauma that supposedly came to light years afterward. And woven through this ongoing narrative whirlwind is Tom Bower, the biographer, who stops short of directly confronting her, while also entertaining that questionable tale about how they supposedly first crossed paths.
Meghan Markle told the world she was a fraud. Perhaps we should have all listened.
Yet it somehow leaves audiences staring in quiet disbelief. Bower doesn't make accusations. He records events. He calmly points out the inconsistencies that feel off and allows the audience to reach their own judgments, because often the strongest form of exposure isn't in bold claims, but in what's deliberately left unspoken. And when it comes to Meghan's pregnancy narrative, Bower's research suggests there's far more unanswered questions than simple maternal moments.
And that ridiculous story about how they first met, the whole thing was a tissue of inaccuracies, to be polite.
What he uncovered next was enough to spark quiet murmurs, even within palace circles. On the surface, Meghan's pregnancy appeared flawless: high-fashion outfits, polished interviews, and the anticipation of a royal child. Yet, according to multiple observers, the narrative seemed to shift with each retelling. What initially sounded like a lighthearted journey filled with baby kicks and healthy routines gradually morphed into a story that felt heavier, more troubling, and increasingly difficult to piece together.
And also, why is the belly several shades browner than anywhere else? It's not supposed to be browner.
Public commentators observed that her delivery appeared to change depending on the platform. In one appearance, she was lighthearted, laughing about midnight cravings. In another, she spoke about anxiety and emotional distress. Then came a podcast episode where she referenced trauma that she claimed had a lasting impact on her life. It wasn't a single, consistent account, it was multiple versions of the same story, all presented under the same royal title. Tom Bower, staying true to his restrained approach, doesn't openly accuse her of contradictions. Instead, he lines up the accounts side by side, allowing the inconsistencies to stand on their own. From his perspective, the concern isn't the words themselves, but how easily the narrative seems to shift. Each retelling appears carefully shaped for a different audience, a different image, or a different emotional response. What may sound like personal growth to a casual listener comes across to Bower as a narrative still being actively constructed.
Do you remember Meghan actually refused to use the hospital that was usually used by royals and refused to use all of the normal medical staff? And there was all of the weirdness over the timing of the birth of Archie.
As his notes start to line up, one unsettling pattern becomes hard to ignore. The pregnancy narrative may shift, but the questions surrounding it remain constant. Things grow even more complicated once the timelines begin to blur. When it comes to Meghan's pregnancy chronology, even seasoned royal observers have found themselves taking notes. Public discussions point out that the dates tied to her announcements, public appearances, and expected due periods often feel mismatched, like pieces taken from entirely different puzzles. In one instance, she's portrayed as newly pregnant during an interview released months after Archie's birth. In another, She speaks about nesting during a window of time that doesn't neatly align with official palace schedules, according to sources. Tom Bauer picked up on a subtle pattern. These overlapping timelines tend to create uncertainty, rather than clarity. It's not necessarily that the dates are incorrect, but that they appear flexible, shifting just enough to suit the narrative being told. In one version, she's nearing delivery; in another, she's only just learning the news. To Bauer, that quiet elasticity isn't accidental, it's narrative construction in motion.
They were like, I just saw this picture I'd forgotten about when you were so pregnant with Archie. I mean, I gained 65 pounds with both pregnancies.
Oh my God, you're so tiny.
And you're in these 5-inch, I always just wear my 5-inch pointy-toed stilettos. You're like, you have the most enormous bump, and your tiny little ankles are bracing themselves in these high heels, but all of my weight was in the front.
Right.
So you're just going, how on earth? Like people,
How on earth?
How on earth am I not just tipping, face planting? It's like, I'm always clinging very closely to my husband. Please don't let me fall.
Yeah.
Online
Yeah.
observers have effectively turned the timelines into a virtual investigation wall, highlighting headlines, comparing photographs, and questioning how official engagements lined up with the claimed stages of pregnancy. While Bauer never makes direct accusations, he does emphasize an uncomfortable reality within royal life. Precision matters, especially when facts don't line up. For him, this isn't about speculation or hidden plots, it's about reliability. When dates stop aligning, credibility begins to weaken. As the timelines raised skepticism, the medical accounts drew even closer scrutiny. According to those familiar with long-running royal debates, Meghan's descriptions of her hospital experiences sound less like fixed medical reports and more like stories that evolve over time. One version depicts a smooth, almost polished delivery, relaxed moments, humor, and even a light-hearted stop for fast food. Yet in later retellings, the same event is described as tense and dangerous, involving alleged complications and urgent medical concern.
It's torture to listen to that woman now, because every other word out of her mouth is a lie. None of it really makes sense.
Tom Bauer never labels the accounts as untrue. Instead, he points out that such sharp shifts in tone are unusual. When people recount experiences of this magnitude, his writing suggests a form of narrative reshaping, where each version appears refined to suit her public image at that specific moment. There's an earlier portrayal that feels warm and approachable, followed by a later one that emphasizes vulnerability paired with resilience. Critics argue this isn't really about motherhood at all. It's about controlling the message. When even small medical details change, audiences begin to sense a disconnect. Is it selective memory, heightened emphasis, or a natural impulse to rework a story over time? Bauer doesn't offer theories, he simply lays out the inconsistencies. But as those differences accumulate, the impact becomes hard to dismiss. The account starts to resemble a carefully staged narrative, rather than an unfiltered recollection. And just when it seems the contradictions have reached their limit, Bauer uncovers something even more unusual. Throughout it all, the emotional framing shifts as noticeably as the facts themselves, marking the point where reinvention quietly takes
There
hold.
is no way on earth that any doctor on this earth would allow a woman with a geriatric pregnancy, high risk, and with 2 epidurals to leave the hospital within an hour of giving birth, which means that the doctors would have had to deliver Archie, spank his ass, wipe Meghan Markle, put her on a van or whatever, and just send her off without testing to see whether there was any nerve damage, because epidurals do that.
By the time Meghan began discussing her pregnancies in public again, a noticeable change had taken place, not in the events themselves, but in the emotional framing. Those familiar with the evolving public narrative point out that each retelling arrived with a different mood, as though every appearance called for a freshly shaped form of vulnerability. The once upbeat, wellness-focused mother-to-be was now speaking in heavier tones about strain, pressure, and private struggles. It went beyond simple memory, it felt like reinvention. Tom Bauer, known for documenting contradictions rather than declaring them, noted how emotion appeared to become one of Meghan's most deliberate instruments. In one period, she was presented as a bright emblem of contemporary motherhood. In the next, she was portrayed as someone barely enduring public scrutiny. Each emotional framing drew in a different audience, sympathy from some, doubt from others. To Bauer, this pattern wasn't accidental. It was carefully orchestrated.
When it stretches, it gets lighter. It doesn't get darker. Does she think that is where 65 pounds of weight was carried?
Public perception began to shift as well. Even casual viewers started noticing a pattern. Each retelling seemed crafted to provoke a specific reaction: admiration, sympathy, or outrage. Meghan's story was no longer just about pregnancy. It had become a reflection of whichever image she wanted to project at the time. Throughout it all, Bauer refrained from judgment. He simply mapped the emotional turning points, the moments that make you question, where genuine feeling ends and performance begins. The true intrigue, however, isn't only in the emotions shared, it lies in the silences that follow. The things left unsaid often speak louder than words. Sources familiar with royal commentary note that Meghan's silences have become almost as notable as her statements. For every emotional detail revealed in interviews, there's a moment she omits entirely, skipping details, blurring timelines, or deflecting questions with a smile. Bauer suggests that these gaps are where the real story resides. He doesn't accuse, he observes, showing how selective storytelling can carry more weight than full transparency. When one interview dwells on emotional trauma but omits basic facts, that absence becomes a statement in itself. Audiences are left asking, why wasn't that mentioned? Public speculation turns these omissions into open invitations for interpretation. Some see privacy, others see strategy. Either way, the unanswered questions echo louder than any confession. Bauer calls this the art of narrative restraint, where what's left unsaid carries more influence than any headline. In the realm of royal storytelling, silence can be both protection and performance, and Meghan, intentionally or not, has mastered both. Yet while silence fuels mystery, Bauer's next observation reveals how he uses that quiet to craft something even more potent. Doubt without accusation, exposure without blame. He doesn't shout. He doesn't label anyone dishonest. He simply organizes the facts and allows the gaps to speak. Sources describe his method as almost surgical, showing enough inconsistencies to provoke thought without crossing into defamation. Public narrative often portrays Bauer as the observer, who carefully balances exposure with precision, letting the story and the silence do the work.